Most of the definitions of success you absorbed were given to you pretty early. They were shaped by progress you could point to and results other people could see. Success meant movement in the right direction. It meant growth that was measurable, outcomes that justified the effort that you were putting in. And over time, those signals became the way you learned to evaluate whether or not your life was actually working. Now, those definitions weren't wrong. They helped you build stability, and they taught you how to carry responsibility and stay disciplined when things mattered. But they were never meant to carry the full weight of your life. At some point, the old measures stopped telling the whole truth. You can still be productive and feel internally misaligned. You can still be making progress and sense that something underneath is strained. The outcomes may look okay, but the cost of maintaining them starts showing up in quieter ways. That's often where God begins redefining success. Not by taking things away all at once, not by dramatic failure. More often it happens through this subtle tension you can't ignore anymore. The same achievements that once gave you energy now feel heavier to carry. And that same pace that once felt purposeful now feels demanding in a way that doesn't quite fit. You start noticing that success, as you've defined it, requires you to be more alert. It takes away the peace that you really long for. This can be disorienting, especially if you've always been someone who takes faith seriously. You did what you were taught, you worked hard, you stayed responsible, you tried to steward your gifts well, and now, without any obvious breaking, it feels like God is asking you to question the very framework that you use to measure faithfulness. And that can feel threatening, because when success gets redefined, it often feels like you're losing your footing. The metrics that you used to trust no longer give you a clear sense of feedback. The wins don't land the same way. The motivation that once came easily now requires effort. You're still very capable, but something inside you is less convinced that striving harder is the answer. And most people interpret that moment as failure. They assume they've lost momentum, that they've become less disciplined, that they're drifting spiritually. Often the opposite is happening. God is drawing your attention to a deeper layer of formation that productivity alone cannot touch. Success, as you learned it, was mostly about movement and output. God's definition is more concerned with who you're becoming while you move. So that's why this redefinition usually shows up internally first. Before your circumstances change, your inner posture starts shifting. You become more aware of what it costs you to keep performing at the same level. You start to notice how much of your energy is spent managing expectations rather than living from trust. And you begin to feel that difference between doing really meaningful work and being consumed by the work. God often uses that awareness to slow you down. And it's not because he wants less faithfulness, but because he wants a truer faithfulness. When success is defined primarily by your results, it's quietly teaching you that outcomes are the proof of your obedience. So you begin to believe that visible progress is the clearest sign that you're aligned. And when that belief takes root, pressure becomes a constant companion. So every day that you have some sort of delay, it feels suspicious. Every pause feels like it's a risk. But faith was never meant to operate that way. Throughout Scripture, God repeatedly interrupts human definitions of success. He chooses a hidden obedience over public achievement. He values faithfulness in obscurity just as much as visible impact. So he often allows seasons where nothing seems to be advancing on the surface, while something essential is being formed underneath. That pattern has not changed. When God redefines success in your life, it's rarely about asking you to do less out of laziness. It's about asking you to do differently from a place of trust. It's about shifting the center you're operating from. So instead of success being measured by how much you can carry, it becomes measured by how well you can remain connected. It's not about constant progress. It's really about alignment. And so instead of success proving your worth, it begins reflecting your dependence. This shift often exposes how tightly your identity became attached to productivity. You may realize that being effective felt safer than being present, that being needed felt more stabilizing than being still, that your success gave you language to explain your value without having to sit with it more deeply. And none of that makes you unfaithful. It makes you human. And God doesn't shame you for building your life around the tools that work, but He doesn't leave you there either. When those tools start shaping you in ways that cost you your interior life, He gently begins loosening their grip. That loosening can feel very uncomfortable. You may feel less certain, you may feel less driven or less impressed with your own accomplishments. You may even feel grief for a version of yourself that knew exactly how to succeed and now isn't sure what the scoreboard even is anymore. And that grief matters because it marks this transition from external success to internal formation. It marks it from performance to present, from proving to trusting. God's definition of success is rarely about speed. It's about faithfulness over time. It's about obedience that remains rooted even when the outcomes are unclear. It's about learning how to work, how to lead, how to serve, without letting those things become substitutes for trust. And this is where many people panic and try to reclaim the old metrics. They push harder, they tighten discipline, they look for quick wins to reassure themselves that nothing has been lost. But redefining success isn't something you can reverse without consequence. Once you've tasted alignment, striving for the old version feels hollow. God doesn't rush this process. He allows you to sit in the ambiguity long enough to notice what matters most. He lets that noise of achievement fade so you can hear what's actually been drowned out. Then He slows your pace, not to punish you, but to re-anchor you. Success begins to look less like expansion and more like sustainability. It's less like being impressive and looks more like being whole. This doesn't mean your work stops mattering. It just means your work stops being the measure of your worth. You can still build meaningful things, you can still lead, you can still pursue excellence, but the internal posture shifts. You no longer carry your life as if everything depends on your output. You begin to trust that God is present in the quiet seasons as much as the productive ones. When God redefines success, peace becomes a signal again. Rest becomes allowed. Obedience stops being frantic and starts being grounded. You may notice that you're less interested in proving yourself. You're less driven by this urgency that you can't explain. And you may still be disciplined, but the discipline feels supportive instead of constricting. So that's not a loss of ambition. It's just a refinement of your ambition. God's not diminishing your calling. He's just deepening. He's teaching you how to live inside without disappearing. He's reminding you that faithfulness isn't measured by how much you produce, but by how present and formed you are while you produce it. So if success feels like it's shifting under your feet right now, it doesn't mean you're failing. It may mean that God is inviting you into a truer definition of success, one that can actually hold your life without hollowing you out. And that redefinition takes time, it takes trust, it often unfolds quietly, but it leads to a way of living that no longer requires you to outrun your own soul. If you want to keep walking this out with me, I'll write one weekly letter for people who are tired in a deeper way. You can find it in the description below.